August 30th, 1945, Yokohama Harbor. The sun had barely risen over the bombed-out warehouses when Tanaka Michiko heard the boots. She pulled her daughter Yuki closer. The 4-year-old weighed only 25 pounds. Her ribs pushed against her torn yukata like bamboo strips. Her eyes had that hollow look that all the children had now. They had been hiding in the warehouse ruins for 3 days. Michiko had already decided what she would do when the Americans found them. The harbor was only 50 meters away. She could reach it if she ran. She could jump with Yuki before the demons got them. It would be better than what the soldiers had told them the Americans would do. The radio had been clear. The Americans ate human flesh. They would torture children for sport. They would do things to women that were worse than death. The footsteps stopped outside their hiding spot. Michiko felt Yuki trembling against her chest. She covered her daughter's mouth with her hand. Maybe they would pass by. Maybe they would not see the small gap in the rubble where they crouched. A shadow fell across the entrance. Then a face appeared. Young, maybe 20 years old, blue eyes. The demon had found them. Michiko tried to stand, but her legs would not work. 3 days without food had left her too weak. The American soldier said something in his language. Then he reached into his pocket. This was it. A gun, a knife, some tool of torture. He pulled out a brown wrapper. He tore it open. He broke off a piece of something dark and held it out to Yuki. Michiko had never seen chocolate before. Neither had Yuki. But the smell reached them. Sweet, impossible. The American smiled and took a bite himself. Then he held out the piece again. By August 1945, Japan was dying from the inside. 6.7 million civilians faced starvation in the home islands. The daily ration had dropped to 150 calories per person. That was less than half what a human body needed to survive. In Tokyo Bay Area alone, over 100,000 people lived in rubble after the March firebombing. They had no homes, no food, and no hope. The children suffered most. 1 in 3 under the age of 5 would not survive to see 1946. Their parents called it the bamboo shoot existence. They lived barely underground, scavenging like animals. Families boiled grass and tree bark to make soup. They ground acorns into flour. They mixed sawdust into their bread to make it fill their stomachs. Mothers walked miles into the countryside to trade family heirlooms for a handful of sweet potatoes. In Yokohama, people stripped the bark from trees in the parks. They caught rats and called it good fortune. They collected rainwater. Because the pumping stations had been destroyed, school children spent their days searching for edible weeds instead of studying. Their teachers had been drafted or killed. Their textbooks had been burned for fuel during the winter of 1944. The Japanese government had abandoned them long before the emperor's surrender broadcast. Military officers hoarded supplies while civilians starved. Local officials fled to the countryside with truckloads of rice. Police stations closed. Hospitals ran out of medicine. The strong took from the weak. Families turned against neighbors for a cup of grain. But the propaganda machine never stopped working. Even as their children died of hunger, civilians heard the same message every day. The Americans were coming to destroy them. Radio Tokyo broadcast stories of American atrocities in Okinawa. Soldiers had given poisoned candy to children. They had burned prisoners alive. They had used civilians for bayonet practice. The government called it the 100 million deaths with honor campaign. Every Japanese citizen would die fighting rather than surrender. School children practiced attacking with bamboo spears. They learned to strap explosives to their bodies. 5-year-olds sang songs about killing Americans. Women received training on how to hide grenades under their kimonos. The military distributed cyanide pills to mothers. They were told to give them to their children when the Americans arrived. Better to die by their own hands than suffer what the demons would do. Neighborhood groups organized suicide pacts. Entire villages planned to throw themselves from cliffs. The Americans were not human. They were kichiku, demon beasts who enjoyed suffering. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, American supply ships carried 23 million tons of food. Operation Blacklist had planned for everything. Each GI would receive 3,000 calories per day. Standard K rations contained chocolate bars, cigarettes, canned meat, and candy. The Navy had ice cream barges that could produce 500 gallons per shift. Coca-Cola had shipped 5 billion bottles to the Pacific Theater. The Americans had learned from Europe. Hungry populations created insurgencies. Well-fed civilians supported occupations. The policy was simple: Feed the population. Prevent disease. Restore order. Build democracy. The ships waiting offshore contained more food than most Japanese had seen in their entire lives. But the Japanese civilians knew nothing about this. They only knew what they had been told. The Americans would rape their daughters. They would eat their children. They would turn survivors into slaves. Every woman received instructions on how to make herself ugly. They rubbed ash on their faces. They cut their hair short. They dressed like men. They hid their daughters in root cellars and mines. As August turned to September, millions waited for death. They did not know that the same soldiers they feared carried chocolate in their pockets. They did not know about the hamburger grills being assembled. They did not know about the milk powder and medicine in the warehouses. They only knew that the demons were coming. Their propaganda had taught them to expect monsters. They would receive saviors instead. But on August 30th, 1945, Tanaka Michiko did not know any of this. She only knew that an American soldier was offering chocolate to her starving daughter. Sergeant Tom Williams of the 11th Airborne Division would never forget what he found at Atsugi Airfield on September 2nd, 1945. Children were eating grass. They moved on their hands and knees through the destroyed gardens like cattle. Their stomachs were swollen from malnutrition. Their hair had turned orange from protein deficiency. One boy caught his attention. The child was trying to dig roots with his bare hands. His fingers were bleeding. Williams approached slowly. The boy looked up with terror in his eyes. He tried to run but collapsed after 3 steps. Williams guessed he was maybe 8 years old. He weighed 35 pounds. His name was Kojima Hiroshi. Williams opened a sea ration and held out a piece of crackers. The boy stared at it like it might explode. His mother appeared from behind a burned tree. She grabbed the food from Williams and took a small bite first. She waited. When she did not die, she gave it to her son. Within 10 minutes, dozens of civilians had surrounded Williams and his unit. They had been hiding in holes and ruins. Now they emerged like ghosts. Mothers held up babies that looked like skeletons. Old men bowed repeatedly while tears ran down their faces. The Americans started opening every ration they had, but panic erupted when they tried to hand out the food directly. People thought it was poisoned. They had been told for years that Americans would kill them with tainted supplies. Lieutenant James Porter found the solution. He sat down in the dirt and started eating from the same can he was offering. He took a bite of Spam, then held out the can to an elderly woman. She watched him swallow. She waited to see if he would convulse. When nothing happened, she took the smallest possible bite. The taste of meat after 3 years made her cry. Word spread through the crowd. The Americans were eating the same food. It was safe. By nightfall, the 11th Airborne had established the first mass feeding station. Within 48 hours, they were serving 10,000 meals per day. But it was the individual items that created the strongest memories. Coca-Cola arrived on September 15th, 1945. The first shipment contained 50,000 bottles. 7-year-old Nakamura Akiko was among the first children to taste it at a distribution center in Yokosuka. She had never experienced carbonation. The bubbles made her sneeze. The sugar hit her system like electricity. She described it as liquid that danced on her tongue. Her grandmother took a sip and declared it medicine. Within days, Japanese civilians were calling it black happiness water. Children learned to say Coca-Cola before they learned any other English words. The hamburgers came next. Field kitchens started producing them by the thousands. Most Japanese had not seen beef since 1942. The military had confiscated all livestock for the war effort. The smell of grilling meat drew crowds from miles away. The Sato family of 6 shared their first hamburger on September 20th. They passed it around, each taking one small bite. The father, a former bank clerk, wept as he chewed. His children had forgotten what meat tasted like. They had to learn the word hamburger because Japanese had no equivalent. Buddhist priests who had forbidden meat for centuries gave special permission. Survival overruled doctrine, but nothing compared to chocolate. The first month alone, Americans distributed 2 million Hershey bars. Children followed GIs through the streets chanting chocoreto, their version of chocolate. It became an unofficial currency. One girl traded her family's ancestral sword for 5 chocolate bars. Her father did not stop her. The sword could not feed his children. GIs taught kids to say thank you in exchange for candy. These became the first English lessons for an entire generation. Spam transformed from military surplus to survival miracle. 100 million pounds were shipped to Japan in the first year. Each can contain enough protein to keep a family alive for days. Housewives discovered it could be sliced and put on rice. It could be fried with vegetables. It could be eaten cold when there was no fuel for cooking. An old fisherman in Yokohama told anyone who would listen that Americans must be gods to have so much meat they put it in cans. His grandson later testified that Spam saved their entire neighborhood from starvation. The medical response matched the food distribution. MacArthur created SCAP, the Supreme Commander Allied Powers Nutrition Program. 3.5 million children enrolled in school lunch programs by October. Each child received 2 pounds of powdered milk monthly. Doctors tracked weight gain obsessively. The average child gained 2 pounds per month for the first 6 months. The transformation was documented in photographs. September pictures showed walking skeletons. By March 1946, the same children had full faces and bright eyes. DDT dusting killed the lice and fleas that spread typhus. Penicillin, which most Japanese doctors had never seen, saved over 100,000 lives from infection and disease. The refeeding had to be done carefully. Starved bodies could not handle normal food immediately. Too much too fast caused refeeding syndrome. Hearts failed from the sudden mineral changes. American medical officers created special formulas. Start with thin soup. Add powdered milk slowly. Introduce solid food over weeks, not days. Build up to normal rations gradually. One nurse, Captain Mary Richardson, kept detailed records of the children in her care. A 6-year-old girl named Yumi arrived weighing 18 pounds. She could not walk. Her hair fell out in clumps. Richardson fed her drops of milk mixed with water every hour for 3 days. Then added rice porridge, then eggs. After 6 weeks, Yumi could stand. After 3 months, she was playing with other children. After 6 months, she had gained 20 pounds. The Japanese could not understand the abundance. Americans threw away half-eaten sandwiches. They gave children entire chocolate bars, not just pieces. They handed out cigarettes like they were worthless. One Japanese official visiting the Yokohama supply depot wrote that he saw more food in one warehouse than his entire prefecture had seen in 5 years. The warehouse covered 10 city blocks. It contained butter, cheese, ice cream, and foods most Japanese had never imagined. The medical intervention went far beyond simple food distribution. American doctors faced a population where entire generations of children had never received proper nutrition. Their bones were soft from calcium deficiency. Their teeth were falling out from scurvy. Their minds were dulled from years of starvation. The challenge was not just feeding them, it was bringing them back from the edge of death. Dr. Robert Harrison of the Public Health Service established the first malnutrition ward in Tokyo General Hospital. He had treated concentration camp survivors in Germany. He said the Japanese children were worse. At least the camp survivors had eaten something before the war. These children had been starving since birth. Their bodies had never learned how to process normal food. The first step was classification. Children were divided into 3 categories. Mild malnutrition meant they could walk and eat solid food. They received regular rations plus vitamin supplements. Moderate cases could not digest normal food. They got special formula made from powdered milk, sugar, and rice water. Severe cases were dying. They needed intravenous feeding just to stabilize. Refeeding syndrome killed more children in the first week than starvation had killed in the last month of the war. Their bodies could not handle the sudden influx of nutrients. Phosphate levels crashed. Hearts stopped. Lungs filled with fluid. American doctors had to teach Japanese medical staff to go slow. A starving child who ate a full meal would be dead by morning. The protocol became standardized by October 1945. Day 1 through 3 consisted of sugar water with electrolytes, small amounts every 2 hours. Day 4 added powdered milk diluted to quarter strength. Day 7 introduced rice porridge. Day 14 added eggs. Day 21 added fish or meat. Full rations came only after 30 days. Even then, children needed monitoring for months. The results were documented photographically. Lieutenant Patricia Mills, an Army nurse, took pictures of every child admitted to her feeding center in Yokohama. She created before and after albums that shocked even experienced medical staff. A boy named Toshi arrived on September 10th, weighing 28 pounds at age 9. His arms were like sticks. His belly was swollen with edema. His eyes were blank. The photo from December 10th showed a different child. He had gained 18 pounds. His face had filled out. He was smiling. Weight gain averaged 2 pounds per month once feeding stabilized. But other changes were more dramatic. Hair that had turned red from kwashiorkor grew back black. Skin lesions healed. Night blindness from vitamin A deficiency reversed. Children who had been too weak to cry found their voices again. Parents reported personality changes. Listless children became playful. Aggressive children became calm. The statistics told the story. In August 1945, child mortality in Tokyo was running at 33% annually. By February 1946, it had dropped to 9%. By August 1946, it was down to 4%. The Americans had prevented a generation from disappearing. They had done it with powdered milk, Spam, and careful medical protocols. They had turned chocolate bars into medicine and Coca-Cola into therapy. The Yokohama supply warehouse changed everything Japanese officials believed about American intentions. Mayor Yoshida Kenzo arrived for his inspection on September 25, 1945, expecting to find military supplies. Instead, he found a city of food. The warehouse stretched for 10 city blocks. Crates reached the ceiling. Forklifts moved tons of supplies every hour. He stood in the entrance for 5 minutes without speaking. The American supply officer, Major Charles Peterson, gave him the tour. Aisle 1 contained powdered milk, 500 tons. Aisle 2 held canned meat, 800 tons. Aisle 3 stored flour, 1,000 tons. They walked past butter, cheese, sugar, coffee, and chocolate. Peterson explained that this was one of 12 warehouses. More ships arrived daily. Yoshida asked through his interpreter why Americans had brought so much food. Peterson looked confused. He said it was obvious. Japanese people were hungry. This simple statement broke something in Yoshida. His own government had told him Americans would use starvation as a weapon. Instead, they were spending millions to feed their former enemies. He watched American soldiers loading trucks for civilian distribution. They handled Japanese requests with more efficiency than the Imperial Army had ever shown. No bribes, no stolen supplies, no preferential treatment for the powerful. The human exchanges that followed created bonds stronger than any treaty. Interpreter Yamamoto Kenji worked at the Yokosuka Distribution Center. He translated between American soldiers and Japanese families every day. He watched relationships form over shared meals. Private Frank Romano from Brooklyn started bringing extra rations for a widow named Sato Haruko. She had 3 children under 10. Her husband had died at Iwo Jima. Romano showed Yamamoto pictures of his own kids back home. 2 boys about the same age as the Sato children. He said kids were kids everywhere. They needed food and safety. Politics meant nothing to hungry children. When Haruko tried to pay him with her mother's silk kimono, Romano refused. He set up a weekly delivery instead. Every Tuesday he brought milk, Spam, and chocolate. The Sato children learned to count in English waiting for him. These scenes repeated across Japan. Baseball games sprouted in empty lots. American soldiers shared hot dogs with Japanese kids who had never seen the sport. Jazz concerts appeared in damaged theaters. Admission was free, but everyone got fed. One Buddhist monk named Tanaka attended a concert in Yokohama. He watched American soldiers dancing with Japanese girls. Everyone was eating hamburgers. He told his congregation that Americans had Buddha nature. They understood compassion. MacArthur's administrative system shocked Japanese officials with its fairness. The 35-point nutrition directive treated all Japanese equally. Emperor's supporters and communists got the same rations. City dwellers and farmers received equal consideration. Women's committees managed local distribution, because MacArthur believed they would be more honest than male officials. He was right. The ration card system prevented hoarding. Each family received cards based on registered members. Cards were marked when food was collected. No card meant no food, no exceptions. Rich families could not buy extra. Poor families were not excluded. The Americans had created a more equal system in 2 months than Japan had achieved in its entire modern history. By November, 400 distribution centers operated across the occupation zone. They ran like clockwork. Trucks arrived at dawn. Staff sorted supplies by family allocation. Doors opened at 8. Lines moved steadily. Everyone got served. Doors closed at sunset. The next day repeated exactly the same. Japanese housewives marveled at the predictability. Under their own government, they never knew if rice would be available. Sometimes they waited all day for nothing. The Americans never failed to deliver. The efficiency extended to complaint resolution. When distribution problems arose, American officers actually investigated. They punished soldiers who stole supplies. They fired Japanese officials who took bribes. They listened to suggestions from local committees. One women's group in Tokyo recommended adding baby formula to the standard ration. Within 2 weeks, it appeared. The mayor of Yokohama summarized the feeling. The Americans fed Japanese children before celebrating their own victory. That single priority revealed everything. The transformation from emergency feeding to sustainable recovery began in January 1946. Japanese administrators gradually took control of distribution networks. The school lunch program that started with American surplus became a permanent institution. It still operates today. Every Japanese child for 3 generations has eaten meals that began with MacArthur's directive. The chocolate generation, as historians call them, changed Japan forever. Kojima Hiroshi, the boy who ate grass at Atsugi, became a trade negotiator in the 1970s. He specialized in U.S.-Japan relations. He said his first bite of American crackers taught him that enemies could become friends. Tanaka Yuki, the girl from Yokohama Harbor, kept a Coca-Cola on her desk for 50 years. She founded a charity that fed hungry children across Asia. By December 1945, Americans had fed 11 million Japanese civilians. 800,000 tons of food were delivered in the first year. Child mortality dropped 70% in 18 months. The statistics only hint at the deeper change. A nation prepared to die fighting surrendered completely to its occupiers within 90 days. Not through force, but through kindness. The philosophical lesson was clear. Japanese children learned that chocolate tasted better than revenge. Their parents discovered that their demon enemies showed more mercy than their own leaders. History proved that a Hershey bar could accomplish what Operation Downfall never could have. The planned invasion would have killed millions. Instead, Spam and powdered milk created the strongest alliance in Asia. Today, elderly Japanese still remember their first Coca-Cola. They tell grandchildren about Americans who shared food when sharing was survival. In Yokohama Harbor, where Michiko once prepared to jump with her daughter, there is now a memorial. It does not commemorate a battle. It celebrates the day when Private Joe Bradley gave chocolate to a starving girl named Yuki. That simple gesture built a bridge that 70 years has not weakened.